Hello ladies and gentlemen, we have wrapped up the final season for Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. We'll be going over the Shibuya arc in a full-fledged review and talking about what we got as a viewer. But of course, you probably want to see it or at least read it first before you watch this video. So in other words, this is your spoiler warning, don't cry in the comments. And of course, if you want to see more anime arc reviews like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It helps me out tremendously and I greatly appreciate it. Now then, let's look at the Shibuya Incident Arc. Now let me be the first to tell you that this is probably the best Jujutsu Kaisen arc we've had. And that's just not because the season's new, but we have a lot more involvement of characters. Matter of fact, we have so many characters involved inside the Shibuya Incident Arc, I can't go over every single one of them. But if you have been watching previous arcs for Jujutsu Kaisen, you can assume they're probably inside this one. And I mean seriously, just look at the cover art. But I also want to mention there's so many fights, we shouldn't go over every single one. Instead, I will highlight the bigger fights within this season and point out how they affect our characters. But before we get into that, let's start off with the plot. As you may well know, this is the season following Jujutsu Kaisen 0 and the Gojo's past arc. Speaking of the Jujutsu Kaisen timeline, the most recent arc we had was season 1. And for the past couple of years, we haven't had much content from our main cast. So we're finally entering an arc where we have the 3 different pieces of Jujutsu Kaisen work put together. And the Shibuya Incident Arc is supposed to be an unfortunate chain of events. Majority of this season happens on Halloween, a time in which our main antagonist, the disaster spirits, as well as Geto can get everyone together. Now the best way to get everyone together is not to yell at the Jujutsu sorcerers. Instead, find a time where everyone's going to be outside for some stupid reason. And that's exactly what they do, picking Halloween to get non-Jujutsu sorcerers outside. However, before that day, we have another event that happens before. If you have been paying attention to the first season, we have a character named Mekumaru. Mekumaru, or Kokichi, is a part of Kyoto High, and he's the robotic looking guy that you see that never has a body. Well, during this event, Mekumaru ends up meeting with Mahito and Geto. They offer a vow towards one another to get something that the other has. The antagonists want to get more information of Jujutsu High, and well, Mekumaru has that. On the other hand, Mekumaru really wants his own body so he can stand on his own 2 feet. And luckily enough, Mahito has the ability to do so with his idol transfiguration. Now, Mahito's not really the smartest of the group, and he's not also the character to make a fair play. So this leads into our first fight right before Halloween. And of course, as you can assume, Kokichi is still a high school student regardless. Therefore, he unfortunately does not win this fight. Of course, it did come through some trickery on Mahito's side, but he still probably would have lost this fight. But what makes this the start of chain events is because this is a high school student, meaning Mahito and Geto were not opposed to killing a young adult. Now, this is not the first time it's happened within this anime, nor will it be the last. But because Mekumaru is smart enough, he was able to somehow help other characters throughout the events of Halloween. And this leads into the start of Halloween, or the Shibuya Incident. To start, the villains decide to put a large domain around Shibuya. Now this domain is not meant to keep other people out, but instead to keep the people inside. Now most of the antagonists really don't care about the non-Jujutsu sorcerers. However, this is where step 1 happens for their plan. Since the purpose is to keep regular people within inside the domain, it's a killing spree inside. In other words, Jujutsu sorcerers have to go in to try to protect the civilians. But our smart, goated, should-be protagonist Satoru Gojo realizes this pretty quickly. So he decides to go in first without getting help. Now if you've seen anything about Gojo whatsoever, you know he really doesn't need the help. So Gojo chooses to go within the domain and he's presented with his first 3 antagonists. The first 2 we have seen before, which are Jogo and Hanami. These 2 of course being natural disaster curses. But the other person is just a curse user who chose to side with the disaster curses. This new character we have not seen before is named Choso. Now these characters know that they were not going to be able to defeat Gojo, I mean we knew that too. But their plan was never really to kill Gojo, but instead seal him away. During this fight they did their best to keep civilians around Gojo so that way he couldn't use his abilities. So because of this he had to make a choice to either kill the people around him or to just not fight. But even though Gojo was still limited during this fight, he was still able to kill Hanami. And just as a reminder, this is a special grade curse. So Gojo being able to defeat Hanami while protecting others and still fighting other curses is kind of crazy. But eventually we do see that Gojo is sealed by Geto himself. And we're also shown something as a viewer that's kind of shocking. While Gojo is sealed up, Geto takes the the stitches off of his head and shows a brain. Now this is the first time we're shown as an audience that Geto is not actually in control of his body. Matter of fact, we're also shown that whoever was able to take over Geto's body can use his sorcerer abilities. Again, this is a Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 review, so we won't talk about who this may be. But in conclusion, this fight ends with Gojo being sealed away. And once again, our antagonists realize that they can't kill Gojo themselves, so they have to seal him away. And even when they seal him away, the seal still can't hold his strength. But for now, it's a good way to get him out of the picture for the time being. Because Gojo's been sealed away, this means many cursed users can now come out. You can picture it like a bunch of rats that's been hiding because there's a vulture that's been flying around. Now, I don't really want to talk about every single one because their importance to the story isn't really there, and this includes special grades or other curses that our heroes have to fight. But we're still going to talk about the most important ones that show up. The two fight/groups that I briefly want to mention are these three users right here, as well as all the fights with Mei. These three cursed users do get their own time to fight, however, their purpose was not to fight themselves. Instead, they were successful resurrecting another character that was in a previous arc, and of course, we'll talk about him pretty soon. When it comes to Mei's involvement, she was able to defeat two different characters. The first one was another cursed user, which was done off screen, which was kind of pathetic, and she was also able to defeat another special grade curse summoned by Geto. Again, these two fights themselves are very minor, so I don't want to talk about it too much. Another fight we had which was pretty minor was Nobara and Blonde Ponytail Boy. Now throughout this season, this character does do a lot more harm than you expect. So realistically, I should give him his props. However, soon as Nanami shows up in the scene, he's put down like a dog. Again, he will appear during another future fight, however, I don't have much to say about him. These fights are mainly meant to be introductions to what the Shibuya arc can give us. And because of these, we now get to enter our next major fight between Yuji and Choso. Now, if you don't know the lore, Yuji actually killed Choso's other two brothers in the first season. And because Choso knows his brother's killers, he has all the right to be mad and ready to fight. And of course, that's what they do. Choso has the ability of blood manipulation. For example, he's able to control his own blood to change its shape and its piercing abilities. Matter of fact, Choso can make the blood so dense he can literally pierce past a wall. So this fight goes on for quite some time, and realistically, Yuji already lost. However, thanks to the help of Mekumaru, he has one more plan up his sleeve. Yuji enters the bathroom and is able to get water on Choso's blood. So within simple terms, the blood as well as the water does not mix together. Therefore, Choso has to rely on his fist instead of his blood manipulation. But to sum up this fight, Yuji eventually loses. But Yuji losing was not the most significant part of this fight. Choso's blood starts to mix with Yuji's blood and something strange starts to happen. Memories that never happened before start to rush into his mind. Some of these memories could have actually happened, however, Yuji was not there. Now again, what does this mean? We can't talk about it now, let's go on to the next fight. Now that Hanami's been defeated, it's time for the next cursed spirit to make his stance. For his first fight ever, we see Dagon show up, who is the next cursed spirit. However, for his fight, he has to go against a lot of characters. Dagon has to go against Nanami, Maki, and Nobito. Now, as we're shown during the fight, Maki has no business being here. However, Dagon does a very good job holding his own against Nobito and Nanami. This makes you realize that these two characters are strong, however, not as strong as you think. Especially once Dagon is able to use his domain expansion. Once this happens, the sea is his domain and you're just going to catch this L. Dagon was so overpowering for these characters, we realize as a viewer that they need help. Now at first during this fight, Megumi does show up to help, however it was more of an escape route. Megumi may be strong, but he's nowhere close to a disaster curse. So while Megumi was trying to make an escape route inside the domain, another character enters the route. And here we have the introduction of Megumi's dad, Toji. Now if you watched the previous Gojo's Past arc, you would know that Toji does not have cursed energy himself. He traded that gift away to have more physical strength. He's very similar to Maki, who also can't use cursed energy, however he doesn't need glasses to see curses. Why is that? I really don't know. It could just be his instincts, but what I can say is his instincts were to beat down Dagon. And I mean, he beat him down brutally. He was even using cursed tools and making them sharper so he could stab him more easily. But after Dagon is eventually defeated, this means two disaster curses are now gone. Toji decides to specifically go after Megumi instead and takes him away. Meanwhile, Jogo Jogo appears and finishes off the job that Dagon could not do. Now, it was pretty obvious that our heroes were not going to win this fight. If you think about it, Nobito, Maki, and Nanami were all struggling against Dagon himself. So soon as you add Toji in the mix, who's a third party and probably will not help you, and Jogo comes by who's a step stronger than Dagon, we all knew that they were not going to walk out of here unscathed. Before Jogo finishes off the job, he senses Sukuna's birth. He immediately rushes over to the scene to see two girls feeding Sukuna the fingers he needs. Now, these two girls were a part of Suguru Geto's story, and of course they're not just feeding Yuji the fingers just because. But first, Jogo tries to kill them to get them out of the way. However, one of them has some type of rewind ability. Even though they were able to escape death once, does not mean it will happen the second time. But in the meantime, Jogo decided to feed Sukuna the fingers that he has. And as you can assume, Sukuna is back. Now, let's just be completely honest, this is the stupidest play they could have made. Sukuna clearly does not have any allies on the battlefield, so he asked to hear one wish from each one of the parties. The girls asked for Sukuna to kill Geto, and instead of them getting what they want, Sukuna decides to kill them instead. Now, let's just be completely honest, this was going to happen no matter what. When it was Jogo's turn to say his wish, he instead said he didn't want anything. He instead says that he was happy just because Sukuna was reborn. However, because of this, it now leads into our next two fights. The first fight being Jogo and Sukuna. Now, just so you know, Jogo is probably the strongest disaster curse past Mahito, and Mahito doesn't really count as a disaster curse. But even so, Jogo does his best to not only not use his domain, but to fight with his full strength. And I cannot lie, this was a pretty good fight. We find out a few abilities Sukuna has, such as Dismantle and Cleave, but most importantly, we see something that even other characters did not know about, which is his fire attribute abilities. During the end of their fight, they have a test to see whose flames burn hotter. And as you would assume, the guy with a volcano in his head should win this, but nuh-uh, he got smoked. But good news is we find out something about Jogo. This character actually has a heart even though he is a curse. Sukuna explains that Jogo wasn't really jealous of people. He was more jealous of the position they have, not being curses. Really, Jogo probably would be happy if you walked around the earth and there was only curses and there was no fighting. And that's honestly a respectable ideal. He just wants a world where curses can remain supreme and he doesn't have to fight people. And it also makes sense as to why they wanted to get Sukuna, who could have made that dream come true. But alas, Jogo is the last disaster curse to go. Now, at the same time, we're also getting the fight between Toji and Megumi. Now, this fight between father and son shows that father is just on a completely different level. But while we all knew that as a viewer, something specific happened when Toji was about to strike Megumi. After getting a pretty good look at his face, he starts to see someone he's seen before. We're then greeted with a flashback showing that Toji sold his son to the Zenin clan. He wanted a certain amount of money if his kid had an inherited ability. But of course he loves that cash and he'll take even less if the kid doesn't inherit one. But during the fight, Toji asked Megumi what's his name. As soon as he heard Fushiguro, he realized that was his son and he will not kill his own son. So, you know, instead of helping his son out, he decides to kill himself instead. You know, smart plays, but at least he didn't kill his own son, right? But you see, after this situation, this now leads into our next big fight. The second fight that Sukuna is a part of is with Mahoraga. Megumi was stabbed in the back by Blonde Ponytail once he survived yet again. Now, this guy Haruta has the ability of miracles. If you have that type of eye to catch on, he has a couple of markings underneath his eyes. Every time this character would have died, he's almost saved because of the markings. This is the same thing as the stockpiling lives. However, because Megumi was on his last leg, he decided to summon Mahoraga. This is a special summoning in which he forced Haruta to be a part of. And once Mahoraga was free, you can't really control him. As you can see how he punches his summoner like it's nothing. Now with Mahoraga summoning, this is a great time for Sukuna to test his mettle. Mahoraga has a few abilities and his most important one is the ability to adapt. Mahoraga has a large wheel a part of his body that allows him to adapt to whatever he's hit by. It's similar to him learning the ability so he can counter it later on. But even so, he still loses. Because Sukuna is considered the king of curses, he makes it look like light work. And as a viewer, you really have to wonder, is Sukuna that much stronger than everyone else? By the end of this fight, Sukuna's caused a lot of damage, destroying a whole town, killing so many civilians, killing Maharaga and Jogo. And while we know he can still cause more havoc, he ends up giving the reins back to Yuji. And at this point, once Yuji gets control, he realizes that he is now a murderer. I hope you've been enjoying this video because we're finally hitting the end stretch of this season. So stick with me here because it's gonna go pretty fast. Next up, we're shown Nanami walking through the subway and he's knocking on death's door. It seems Mahito's been watching him this whole time and he has a trap set up for him. While Nanami does his best to stop all the other transfigured humans, it's just not enough. Eventually, Mahito gets his hands on him and that's game over. And it just so happens when Nanami was about to take his last breath, Yuji Itadori walked down the steps. And at this moment, Mahito not only kills Nanami, he confirms to Yuji that he is a curse. He doesn't cause these bad acts for a reason, that's just who he is as a curse himself. And this starts the long fight between Mahito and Yuji. Now this whole fight is great, however, we get to see that Mahito has more tricks than we thought. We're shown that Mahito is a true curse. Mahito kills because he finds it fun. We're even shown throughout this interaction that Mahito doesn't even listen to the other cursed spirits. Since Mahito has the ability to do so, he split himself into two to run away from Jogo. Now the clone of Mahito ran away from Jogo and he actually found Nobara. We're shown throughout this fight that he's for sure not as strong as the original Mahito. However, he was still able to give Nobara a run for her money. Nobara also figures out that this Mahito does not have the ability of idle transfiguration. So even though he will be able to touch her, he cannot transform her into a monster. And because these fights are going simultaneously, this helps out Yuji and it helps out Nobara. But Mahito's clone does the right thing and chooses to run away. Once the clone of Mahito runs back to his original self, we thought they were going to combine back together. Instead, they run past each other and the Mahito that has idle transfiguration was able to touch Nobara. Now this is where Jujutsu Kaisen stands out amongst other shonen. This show is not afraid to kill off their important characters. And as far as we know as a viewer, this is the end of Nobara. Now of course Yuji, he's been through a lot. He lost a lot of friends, a lot of people he's killed. And eventually it's just way too hard to keep going. Now I do want to say this, that Yuji Itadori did suffer throughout this arc. But I'm not dumb enough to be one of those guys that say no other anime character has suffered as much as he has. I mean, let's be honest, if you're saying that, you just don't watch anime. Plus, there is some good news for Itadori because Big Bro shows up in a time of peril. Now, Todo does his best to pick up Yuji while keeping Mahito off his back. And once both of them start fighting together, it makes you wonder how they weren't able to defeat Mahito earlier. I mean, Mahito is still a growing curse. We heard that from Jogo himself. But to watch him keep up with some A-level fighters is quite amazing, to be honest. Now with Todo's ability, by clapping, he's able to change positions of two different objects. Now that could be an object, that could be a person, it's up for grabs. And on top of that, it doesn't seem like he has to clap per se. Now from an anime standpoint, we do hear a clap here, so I don't know how this happened. I mean, for real, what did he just clap here? His butt cheeks? Nonetheless, as this fight continues, this is where all three of these characters start to hit their limits. The show even says that these characters are doing a 120% of their potential, which I mean, you know, sure, whatever. The first ploy that Mahito has is to separate Todo and Yuji. Todo focuses on some very strong dolls, but is able to kill them within one punch. Meanwhile, Yuji is doing his best to defeat Mahito while using multiple black flashes. Once they're able to get back together, Mahito tries another tactic. If he's able to use his domain expansion before Sukuna's able to realize it, he may be able to pass. Sukuna won't be able to intervene and he'll be free to use his abilities. Luckily enough for him, he's able to do so and changes Todo's arm before he's able to realize it. Now Todo did cut off his left arm instantly, however Mahito charges towards him. But I guess Mahito didn't realize that Todo can use his own ability with someone else. By using his right hand and clapping Mahito's hand, he's able to change places with Itadori. This now allows Itadori to land another black flash against Mahito. Unfortunately, Todo's out of the fight now and really can't do much without his boogie woogie. So at this point, Mahito has one more trick up his sleeve. While he knows he can change the shape of the soul from whoever he touches, he realizes he can do it to himself. And therefore, he changes himself to a sharp assassin. Now this Mahito form isn't just quick and strong, but he also has a very good hardened defense around his body. Realistically, Yuji kind of lost here. However, Mahito starts to feel some fatigue because of all the black flashes he got hit with. Plus, Todo is still alive and will fight if he doesn't have his ability. So he hits his empty palm with his fist and Mahito thinks someone's going to change places. To his dismay, they do not, and he's then again hit with another black flash. So to sum this fight up, eventually Mahito loses. As a viewer, we next get an analogy of Yuji hunting down Mahito. They compare it with the wolf hunting down a rabbit. And I can't really say that's what this fight felt like, but I understand. Once Mahito is crawling trying to get away, we finally see the big baddie himself. Geto shows up protecting Mahito, but also holding off Yuji. Now mind you, Geto has not fought yet. Also, he's stronger than most of the cursed spirits. So Mahito tries to save himself from Geto, however, Geto stores him inside his body. After that, Urame shows up yet again, but this time siding with Geto. Now Urame is similar to Sukuna and the person inside of Geto who's been living for 1,000 some years. And as you can assume, these characters are a different type of strong. Even though by this time the Kyoto students show up to help, they don't do anything. Watching them struggle to even land a hit kind of proves what Mekumaru said before. The only student from that school that could have even helped was Todo himself. And now that he's out of commission, we all know that these other kids can't do anything. On top of that, Choso shows up again saying he's been lied to, explaining that all this time Geto's not been telling him the truth and Yuji is his brother. Now in this season for the Shibuya Incident Arc, they do not dive into that here. But when we get into the Culling Game arc, I'm sure you'll get your answer then. Nonetheless, all the sorcerers do their best to fight off Geto and Urame, but they're just not strong enough to do so. But luckily enough, another character appears out of nowhere with another YU name. This character we saw in the Gojo's past arc named Yuki. She's been doing her own vigilante thing overseas for quite some time because she does not agree with Jujutsu High. But now that the world's in danger and everything, this is a great time to show up. The person within Geto's body explains that he does not see the purpose of human life. Instead, he imagines a world where you can use these people as resources instead. And as you can of course assume, Yuki does not agree. However, the character is not in the best shape right now to fight off Geto, his stockpile of curses, and Urame. So Geto ends up getting away yet again. After this event, it basically wraps up the end of the Shibuya incident. Following this, we're rolling right into the Culling Games and we're presented with two different pieces of information. The first one being is what Jujutsu High did. We're shown that Jujutsu High is very incompetent and they're scared of everything. So they decided to punish some characters because of how they acted during the events. For example, they want to kill Yuji Itadori because of what happened with Sukuna. Now I understand, many people were killed because of Sukuna. However, if Sukuna was never there, there would have been a lot more people killed anyways. So for them to say, let's go ahead and kill Yuji Itadori because of Sukuna is kind of crazy. It makes you really think that they never really cared about him and really turned on him quick. Another character they decided to go against was Satoru Gojo. When he used his domain expansion to caught many people in the subway, they blamed him for that, saying that Gojo is an accomplice of what happened. Now this play right here, I have no idea what they're thinking. It really shows you how dumb this council can be. And since they decided to call for help, here enters a new character that we've seen in the movie. Yuta and Rika, quote unquote Rika, are now back. And they've tasked Yuta to kill Yuji Itadori because of Sukuna. Now the characters have made a pact before that if Gojo's not around to protect it, Yuta will step in. But now that Gojo's considered technically a bad guy, does that mean that Yuta's gonna go against him too? Who knows, we'll have to wait and see. But with that, it marks the end of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, Shibuya Incident Arc. So let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought about this arc. It was a very long and action-packed season, but I do believe it was the best so far. And now that we've been teased for Season 3 coming up pretty soon, hopefully we don't have to wait too long. But with that, thank y'all for watching. I greatly appreciate it. And if you want to see another arc review like this, go check out the Gojo's past one over here. Y'all have a good one. Take care. Peace.